All right, so I want to say good evening to our brothers and sisters across Guyana, and especially those in Barbados. I want to welcome you to another episode of the Alliance for Change, Alliance for Change on the Move. And tonight um, we have a very special guest and one of our executive member, former director of EPA, Dr. Vince Adams, who is very well known and the battle that he's fighting for us here in Guyana and with regards to environment and our um, recently discovered oil resource resources in Guyana. So, with all um, said, I wanted to welcome Dr. Vince Adams to tonight's program, and we will be discussing some matters really with the oil and gas sector and his recent letter that he wrote in the press. And we know Dr. Vince Adams is a person, he's a no-nonsense man, and he speaks nothing else but the truth and the facts, and his area of expertise, and he knows well about oil and gas. He's not bluffing for whatever he's going to write or whatever he talk. So, Dr. Vince, welcome to tonight's program, and I know you wrote that letter, and there was some mischief done by your good friend, the vice president, on that issue. So I want you to clear the air on that, on some of those matters and issues.
Thank you, Ricky, and once again, welcome to our listeners all over the country, but specifically this program, of course, is it comes out of the great county of Belize, one of my other favorite county. I used to make a lot of runs there at Kanji, so so I'm sure I still got a few fans up there. They probably didn't like me too much because when I put 100 in them, up right there in Kanji for Demerara. But nevertheless, it's nice to be back. But I just want to bring attention to this issue again of the unlimited parent company guarantee for all Guyanese. And when the coalition was in office, folks, now the headline of the article that I wrote was the EPA caught in blatant untruthfulness. It's really lies. EPA caught in blatant lies and Exxon's parent company guarantee. And a parent company guarantee, all it says is that Exxon have to bear the cost of any spill that occurs, period. So the EPA, and this year has been going on for the last 4 years. What happened? The history behind this was when I arrived at the EPA, the LISA 1 was already signed by the current EPA head at the time, Parshram, Kemraj Parshram. He had already signed the LISA 1 that had no coverage, none, zero coverage whatsoever. So when I arrived, when they brought the LISA 2 permit to me, I asked the question, what is going to happen if we get a spill? Who's going to cover it? And I told them, you will not produce a barrel of oil until you gave us a guarantee that you will pay for all costs on our spill. This is, by the way, at the same time, remember we had the Macondo spill, the British petroleum spill, in the Gulf of Mexico that cost $145 billion US. So I'm asking them, you expect that we cannot afford it? Our entire national budget is at that time apart. Well, we know it. Well, I don't even think it was. Ricky could know it better than I do. But in 20 when we signed this in 2019. Our budget was what, about $300 million US. So here we are, if that much. So here we are, we could get a spill for $145 billion US, but and they want us to cover that when our entire national budget is barely not even $500 million. So that's what we were dealing with. So I told them, you will not produce a barrel of oil until we get that full liability coverage. So we decided, well, here's the first thing that Exxon did, which is what normal all the big companies normally do. They set up what are called these subsidiary companies, or child, I like to call them child companies, and they set them up to operate so that to insulate them, Exxon, from any liability if something happens. Exxon could walk away. Folks, I want you to hear this. Exxon's name, the big Exxon company that has the money, their name is not on any official document. It is ESO, Exxon Mobil Guyana Limited, EMGL. EMGL does not have any assets to cover an oil spill. So they set up EMGL, and when EMGL, something happens, they can walk away, and EMGL could declare bankruptcy because they don't have anything else. They don't have any assets to cover it. And so guess who is left? It's left for us to foot the bill. We can. It left to the rest of the Caribbean to foot the bill. And folks in Belize, especially in the quarantine in those years, you are right on the forefront of everything because you are on the coast. Everything would be washed away. Your fisheries and everything. That entire coast would be gone. Trinidad would be gone all the way to Jamaica, and they're dependent upon tourism, fisheries, etc. So that was why we demanded the coalition demanded parent company guarantee. We wrote it into the permit. Now, I I had an interview last week or the week before, and it was about talking about the same thing when the vice president came out and started trying to fool people that we will sell all of the assets if we get a spill. We will sell the assets to pay for it, which was absolutely foolishness because the contract itself says all of those assets belong to the government of Guyana. When this contract is over or whenever if they leave, they have to turn over those assets to us. It's our for free. So the foolishness about that statement that he made is that we're gonna seize our own assets and sell it to pay for a spill. So I attacked that. So EPA now, I guess under the direction of the government, EPA comes out and say they did not address that. They came out and in response to that, which was about the assets they can't sell, the equipment and stuff. They came out now, did not address that, and decide to go with this parent company guarantee, which, to be honest, I welcome because it was laying dormant for a while, and I thought the thing is that they're so without any sense for them to raise this ant's nest up again. So I welcome it because so guess what they did? They said that they said nowhere in that permit did I ever say anything about the unlimited parent company guarantee, which was a blatant lie. So guess how what they did to deceive the public? They quoted the clause on the question and they left out the 9 key words that says that signifies the unlimited parent company. They left out that 9 words to deceive the public, and that's what was at issue. So, but you don't even have to listen to me. We after I left, after the coalition government left office and they got into office, they decided to go and work with Exxon against our own people to decide that they're not gonna comply with that clause. Two courageous citizens sued the EPA, and Judge Samuel Kissoon, the Honorable Judge Samuel, the case was overwhelmingly ruled against the EPA. And here is what the judge himself interpreted. Here's how the judge interpreted that clause. The judge says the permit holder, which is Exxon, is mandated to provide insurance and provide for the financial assurance of an unlimited parent company guarantee to cover everything over and above. If that is
Absolutely.
not unlimited parent company guarantee, I don't know what it is. It says again, Exxon, you have to get insurance. Not Exxon, EMGL, which is the subsidiary child company. You have to go get insurance. Okay, you could afford to buy insurance, a premium for insurance. However, if that insurance cannot cover the spill, then the parent company guarantee has to come in and cover any cost over and above. Means there's no limit. As a matter of fact, the judge said it was clear and unambiguous terms in simple language that boded no uncertainty or lent itself to ambiguity, meaning that if the child company EMGL insurance is inadequate, then the parent company Exxon has to provide financial assurance to cover the remainder. Or simply put, there is no hurdle to the unlimited guarantee. So this was plain as crystal. The judge went on to force Exxon is mandated to provide insurance and financial assurance of unlimited parent company guarantee to indemnify the government. But here is how the judge, when the judge looked at all of the evidence in terms of how the EPA was behaving. Now remember again, the coalition government, when I was there, we put that clause there to protect the people and to protect us from bankruptcy, protect us and the Caribbean from financial and environmental bankruptcy. So that was under the coalition. When the current PPP government came into office, they sided with Exxon to remove that because Exxon doesn't want, they can walk away. They don't want to hold themselves liable. So here's what the judge said about this agency that is supposed to be protecting the people the way that we did when I was there and under the coalition. Here's what the judge said. The judge said that the agency has descended into a state of inertia and slumber at the critical juncture of an emerging oil sector. It says, if the guarantee is in place and there is the release of oil, then EMGL, to the extent that it's unable to cover that amount, as it's largely an assetless, everything that I just told you, this is not me alone, this is what the judge wards are saying. As it is largely an assetless subsidiary, then Exxon, the parent company, comes into play. If, however, listen to this, if, however, that event occurs and there is no unlimited parent company guarantee, then the state of Guyana is liable for all that occurs. This is not coming from me. This is what the judge is saying the clause is. So here are some things that the judge said, which is pretty damning of a government that is supposed to be their main role and responsibility is to protect the people, stand for the people. Here's what the judge said. The judge says, at every juncture engaged in this is the EPA they're talking about. At every juncture, the EPA is engaged in a course of action to undermine and erode the terms and conditions of its own permit, an egregious state of affairs that has engulfed the EPA in a quagmire of its own making. The EPA has abdicated the exclusive statutory responsibility entrusted to it by Parliament. Where Ricky stand? The judge further says the EPA sought refuge in silence, avoidance, concealment, and secrecy. Listen to this, they acted in unison with EMGL. And EMGL engaged in a course of action made permissible. EMGL is engaged in a course of action made permissible only by the omission of derelict, pliant, and a submissive EPA. Let me repeat that. EMGL is engaged in a course of action made permissible only by the omissions of a derelict, pliant, and submissive EPA, notwithstanding the grave potential danger and consequences to the state and citizens if an event occurred in an absence of such financial assurances mandated by the permit. Such conduct, again, this is not me, This is the judge. Such conduct is nothing short of reprehensible and inconsistent with its mandate and functions. It's relegated itself to a state of laxity of enforcement and condonation, compounded by a lack of vigilance, thereby putting this nation and its people in the grave potential danger of calamitous disaster. This is what this government is supporting. It says, by its failure and omissions, if it by the failure, by its failure, this is the EPA, by its failure and the government, by its failure and or omission, it placed the nation, its citizens, and the environment in grave peril. Notwithstanding this grave allegation of dereliction of its function and of potential calamitous consequences. And as I said, um, they were aided and abetted by the EPA to unlawfully not go along, and here's the other thing, folks. If you think that this can't happen, the judge was so thorough in this litigation. The judge cited a case with Shell Oil Company, the other big major, operating in Nigeria. The case was tried in London, in the Supreme Court, as a matter of fact, where some Nigerian citizens sued Shell, which is the same situation. We have a very similar case to Guyana. The Nigerians sued Shell to pay for some oil spills. You know what was like? What was Shell's defense? Shell's defense was using the same exact thing: is that they were not responsible to pay for an oil spill that is caused by their subsidiary operator. So that is a case that that the judge cited, and which is frightening. So it's not a case where this is just theoretical stuff you're putting here. This is a real case of a Nigerian case where Shell was sued, and their defense was that we're not responsible. You go to our subsidiary operator. The government. It's the bottom line here is that unlike the coalition government, which is factual, this government is betraying its own people, denying them this unlimited parent company guarantee, while granting Exxon the unlimited guarantee to stand with Exxon against its own people at all costs. Let me repeat that. They're denying us an unlimited guarantee to cover us from bankruptcy or environmental disaster. However, they're giving Exxon the unlimited guarantee that they will cover them or stand with them against our own people, the Guyanese people. And if again, Judge Kissoon, I just want to close again. If Judge Kissoon characterized the EPA as submissive and in unison with Exxon. And I mean, we don't have to go far to get some examples where that is happening. So it is unthinkable though that the untrustworthiness of this government could have sunk any lower. And in any other country that honors good governance and the rule of law, the EPA head or whoever else it is would have been removed for this misconduct, notwithstanding the many publicized other transgressions and incompetence. For example, put aside Exxon for a while. Look what happened at Crane. They will go over there to Crane. First of all, they said it was because of the people pot on the fire that is causing whatever was appearing on the tiles. Then they came back with an instrument that said that they give them an outrageous reading, and then not to find out that that was all nonsense, and then had to come back and apologize. Well, when what I learned is that all those equipment that they have, their instrument, they're out of calibration now. That is dangerous. I remember when I arrived at the EPA that we had the same exact thing, and I just stopped them from using those instruments. We sent all of those instruments to Florida to make sure that they probably reserviced, calibrated, and even purchased new equipment. We hired a specialist to come in to maintain and to keep up that calibration. It's fallen back to where it was before under the same person who was there when all of this was happening. So the EPA has gone back to its old ways. Um, and there are several other things. They are allowing Exxon to operate above its safe operating limit illegally. The environment impact assessment says that Exxon cannot operate, and that's the Bible of the industry. You cannot go against the EIA. It says that Exxon should be operating, its safe operating limit is 120,000 barrels per day. They're operating at 165,000 barrels per day, about 40% higher, which, by the way, what that does, it increases the probability or likelihood of a spill. But then if you get a spill, you don't have any insurance to cover it. I mean, any liability coverage in terms of a parent company guarantee. Um, and here's another thing. You remember what I said in terms of the submissiveness and the operating in unison with Exxon? Exxon files, they're hiding Exxon files in the executive director's office. That's a fact. Now, why would you hide Exxon file? Now, you're not hiding the Guyanese operator's file. First of all, that was the other thing. When we arrived, before that, under that same passion, we did not even have a filing room. We didn't know how many operations we had. We had to go, we had to spend overtime to work and bring everything. We built a new brand, state-of-the-art file room where we can manage it. We hired staff for that file room. Very rigorous management of the file room. They removed the Exxon files and put it into the executive director's office to be under lock and key. So you don't have to, the facts are there to show how submissive we are and doing everything that Exxon wants. So it's not only what I'm saying, it's what the facts are and what the judge is saying. As soon as we left office, it wasn't what? Weeks or months after. We remember when they went and cut down all the mangroves and Freedom Hoop, all those mangroves which are supposed to be sacred, they cut down those mangroves to put up a shore base belonging to their friends and families. They're dumping toxic produced water into the ocean, which we have, which we had prohibited, which we told them that it is going to be prohibited, yep. And of course the flaring. We know that we've beaten that magnesium where they're flaring, meaning the gas that is produced, which is highly toxic gas. And we know all about the climate change and all this kind of stuff, but it also has another effect of creating acid rain. When the gas comes up there, because it's acidic gas, it falls down back as rain, gets into your rivers and all of the other water streams. It becomes toxic. It kills your animal life and everything. Nature, it kills nature. Even your agriculture. It kills your agriculture. It damages your car in terms of rust and everything else. So they have decided that to tell Exxon, okay, you can go ahead and flare as long as you can afford to pay for the flaring. So they're saying you can pollute as much as you want as long as you pay for it, which is standing on the head of any environmental controls. It's counter to any common sense in terms of how you manage. We should be preventing environmental, the damage to the environment. And the thing is, when Exxon does that, when we're paying them, the amount of money that they're paying is small compared to the amount of money that they're making by flaring. Because they're saving costs, they don't have to re-inject. So those are the kind of thing which is a big contrast between what had happened, what was happening, and what we are putting, the guardrails that we had put in place when we were in office, to what is happening now. We've gone back to where we started, which is dangerous for this country, and Exxon is getting everything that they want, and like the honorable judge said, we're pliant and submissive and in unison with Exxon, while Exxon makes money and we giving them an unlimited guarantee. that we're going to
And
watch
Doc,
their back against our own people.
Doc, and that is precisely I wanted to come to. And I wanted to tell the people in Guyana, this is where the government has reversed exactly what we have done when we were in office. And I wanted to remind them that I make some note here that the Natural Resources Fund was one of the things that they reversed. They removed the 22 man
Yep,
um, that we had on the committee and they put it with 5 man, where the chairman has been selected by the president. And they also put our two nomination, which was yourself, we nominated, and Christopher Ram as the independent person, and none of you guys they accepted that they put in their own people who are their friends with and
yep,
said this is opposition people. This
yep,
is what they have done. Then they have removed the clause because remember we had a sovereign wealth fund
yep,
where when you do withdrawals, that every year that you're going to do withdrawal, the percentage becomes smaller that you're going to be withdraw from that fund, from the natural resources fund, which is supposed to be going to the sovereign wealth fund for future generation. They have removed the forest drawing over 95%, I think to 100%. They remove all that money from there. And so what left for our generation is nothing for the future generation. Then the local content policy. The local content policy, if we didn't fight, we had 14 clauses that we changed in Parliament. They didn't accept none of them. None of them, because when they did, they went on and they changed the clauses. But before I go on to the others, I just want to welcome Colin Haynes. Welcome to our program tonight. We have Dr. Vince Adams with us. So we will get to you in a few moments, Colin. Let me just continue on this path here. So the local content policy, we have to fight. These guys go into Parliament and change it clause by clause, but put back the same word, but just change one word and say it. So therefore, they rejected what we were saying. And we talk about the no parent company guarantee. You said it was there. They deliberately try to sideline that. And
yep,
then we talk about training school. We had to have people to go to train. They now 4 years plus in government, where our Guyanese people could have trained, like other countries, like in Ghana, like in Norway, they have their own people who will take over these facilities, which is supposed to be enshrined in the contract by this thing. They're not interested in our Guyanese people.
no,
Then I recall um, Doc, in 2017. I don't know if you were in
no,
Guyana then.
not then.
When we had, I think Raphael there, he brought in a professor from Trinidad. His name was Hussein, Roger Hussein, who tell us about the resource course and say that Trinidad made that mistake along with other countries and try talking to us not for us not to make that same mistake. So if you remove all this here and all that you're talking about parent company guaranteed and all what they have been sidelining on the contracts and not working with that contract, therefore you are plunging into that resource course. When
Yep,
we had the Canadian auditor team came to train us, everything that they taught us, they were government of Guyana currently are doing the opposite of that.
yep,
And therefore, like when we had it, and the reason why we created a natural resources fund is that that money was supposed to be spending by itself into the economy, not to go to the treasury and then come back into parliament and then spread it. It will be approved by parliament, but not into the general national budget because you cannot see from the oil money what is spending to which project.
yeah,
What they did now, they lump everything together now and it's just dismantled. So you don't know exactly where the oil money gone.
yep,
And that is the problem. And they're not focusing also, Doc, they're not focusing also on using that money to build the other sectors that have been struggling. And
yep,
so therefore, if by God's um, will that we don't have an oil spill, or if we do have one, then all this here will be crumbled.
And it would not even be close to being enough, you know.
And you have been quoting some figures. You have been quoting some in Parliament also, and telling them the examples, the Macondo that you speak about, the other one, the Gulf of the Gulf, all those pills, and to just give an example as to how this the danger of having a parent company guarantee. And I'm really happy that you're bringing to the language to the Barbados people to understand the importance of a parent company, unlimited parent company guarantee, because I recall, Doc, also when we were doing the European Union flag license for forestry, and we were crafting that agreement with the European Union, I have raised also parent company in that thing.
Yep.
And it's amazing to know how people going to resist you on these matters. I don't know
Yep.
why the parent company, you can't have the local company here, like what Barama was doing, operating here in Guyana, just like you have the Exxon local company, we call it child company,
Yep.
and they are trading on the stock market with
Yep.
a bigger thing, earning more money and more dollars from the thing. And whenever they're ready, just cut and gone. And I'm also happy that you raised the point about um, our crude oil here. And I've noticed that Exxon want to close off some shops in like Suriname and some other countries to come to Guyana here. People must understand the resource that we have, the quality that we have, the amount that we have. So therefore, we have to be 10 times better than we're doing today. And I wanted to, Doc, but before I ask you the question, I want to bring in Colin. I really didn't want to switch off from this program. Colin, give me a minute. I want to ask you, Doc, that some of the not I don't want to put it recommendations, but some of the policies are things that once when we get back in government after 2025 election, that what we're going to be corrected.
That's
Because
correct.
I know, Doc, there are a lot of people telling us we have a lot of work to do when we go back into office.
That is
A
correct.
lot of work. The mess that we got to clean.
That is correct. And
So I want,
yeah, let me add quickly to something that I'm glad you brought up, the NRF. That 22 member that the committee that Mr. Granger put in place covered every spectrum, covered all walks of life in Guyana. And now they got rid of that. And then, like you said, all of their people were appointed, even though they had an agreement with the coalition that they were going to have two people on that
mm,
board. And now they're calling. And by the way, I saw the president. You remember he came out here on Wednesday morning, early morning, talking about an independent board. How could it be an independent? On top of that, do you remember they lambasted when the coalition government was putting that NRF Act together? They said too much power is vested in the minister. Well, guess what? In their act, all of the approvals, there's approval language in all parts of that act where the board, that same board, and the committees got to go back to the minister. So it's hypocrisy, and it's blatant lying to the people again. Lying to the people. I would prefer to
the
have a
hypocrisy,
22
Doc.
member
I'm
team.
looking for a video to share
Yeah,
where it was stated before these guys get took back the office in 2020 that they're gonna be renegotiate that contract,
yeah, yeah. They're gonna renegotiate.
right? And
I know,
it's really
but
a
the
sham.
barefaced
It's a
thing is,
sham.
which is exactly what my letter was. These people believe that somehow the ice passes, that somehow we in that ice will see, and ears to hear. They say like the president, I mean the vice president is denying that he ever said that they're going to renegotiate the contract, and he's on video. It's the same thing the EPA is saying, that even though it's written into the permit, the EPA is saying it doesn't exist. So that's how they operate. So believing that people are foolish, we don't see, we don't have a brains, and we don't we it's out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Doc, I want to thank you very much for the perspective on the oil and gas. We got two more topics that we're going to deal with. And
Yeah,
so I'm going to be asking your views on those topics also.
sure.
We have with us here tonight, folks, Colin Haynes, who are specialized in public health. And Colin, I know that this is your strength and your area. We have dealt with the environmental aspect of our health, and we are hoping that nothing that we are seeing here happens, but we have to prepare for it, Colin. We have to prepare for anything to happen because we have to guarantee our Guyanese people that their life is in our hands. It must be safe. It must be protected for the future generations. Those are the responsibility of us here now by crafting policies to ensure that all those things are sustainable and ensure that they are protected for our future generation to come. And I know one of the troubling thing, and especially if you look at the figures over the years, suicide in our region 6 was very high,
Right.
particularly in that region. But I know it's becomes a little predominant in other regions. But I want you to speak to us, Colin, about your views and your perspective on the suicide in Guyana.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ricky. It's great to be in the show, Dr. Adams. It's good to be with you as well.
Same
So
here.
we're going through a health crisis in Guyana, and it's not only relegated to suicide, but it's so many other things, right? But back in the 90s, we were dying. Major diseases was typhoid, dysentery, malaria, and then with the advent of HIV. But now we've moved from a low income country to a lower higher income country or middle higher income country. And so with that comes all the different types of diseases, right? So all the different types of conditions, now, I'm not against fast food or business entities, but we have more fast food entities than we've ever had before. And with that comes higher levels now of diabetes, hypertension. We have higher levels now. The number one killer for Guyanese now is heart disease. The number one killer for Americans is heart disease. So as you can see, and then behind that is stroke, and then you have hypertension, diabetes, kidney disease. So right now, we are experiencing all of this development. We're in a boom, and so that comes with a different way of life. And with that different way of life, that's also perpetuating and allowing a lot of different diseases are coming. So, but the main issue here is that do we have a health sector? Do we have a health sector that is capable, that is able to facilitate this changing dynamics? And this dynamics, I mean, it just changed overnight. I mean, the last 6 or 7 years, as you see, that stuff just changed altogether. Now, alongside with that, there's a greater demand on people now. The cost of living is higher. People are being paid lower, right? All these things now have a chain effect. So when we talk about mental health and suicide, you can't just look at it as, okay, this is a problem that is happening, but we have to look at it in context of society. And so that's why I give that preamble, that background, to be able to show you how, because we are a product of our environment, we're a product of the house we live in, we're a product of economic development, and all these things are part of health education as well. They're called social determinants of health. So they depends on where you live, what you do, how your economic status is. All of that factors into healthcare matters. Now, Guyana now, you drive on the roads, you see there, you get a high level of anxiety just in Georgetown driving around with all these traffic. So all of these things build up into that mental state, and mental health becomes a big issue. And as you know, we were number one in the world suicide. Now we're at number two, which is still a big deal, right? We're behind Greenland now, I think. But the reality of it is on the ground is you've got, roughly about 240, 250 dying every year of suicide. The number is like 32 per every 100,000. All right. And so with this changing dynamics, with these numbers we're having, it calls for robust action, right? When we started, for instance, suicide hotline, the suicide hotline started out in the police station, in a police precinct. right? So at the same time, don't forget, suicide also was illegal about 2 years ago. And maybe 2 years before that, when we started a hotline, we started out in the police station. So who would call about attempted suicide or committed suicide if you're calling the people who will prosecute you? That just doesn't make sense, right?
Yes.
In addition to that, we haven't really take stringent ways to deal with the elephant in the room, stigma. Folks today, they're experiencing anxiety, depression, hopelessness, helplessness, grief. So suicide just becomes the end game, or what we call it now is self harm, because I think it's important for us to change, as experts are suggesting, we need to change the definitions, change the discussion in terms of how we mention things. So self harm becomes the new word, right? And we don't say somebody commits suicide; we say they attempt suicide. But as I was saying before, that all of these things building up, you're not being paid well, right? Christmas is coming. You can't see the money, right? You gotta buy your blinds, you gotta buy your food, you gotta think, you get anxious, you get nervous, you get depressed, and then things happen. For instance, you're sitting here waiting to get paid for the holidays, and all of a sudden the boss decided he don't want to pay you, and you can't go home and tell your wife now that the boss man didn't pay me and so forth, and all these things that I'm telling you, they're not just stories, they're real things that have happened. And our two biggest suicide capitals in the world, in the country rather, is Blackbush Polder. Well, used to be Blackbush Polder and Suddy, but now it's moved to the Quarantine Coast. So now, at every different village along the way, from Firish all the way down, we're hearing about suicide cases or self harm cases happening every day. And so, the most disheartening part of this is, and what I cannot really understand, is why is the government afraid to publish or tell us about the data, right? Data is not something to be politicized. Data is what decision makers use to make more informed decisions, right? So if you have the data and you're looking at it, you're seeing that, okay, well, I can make a better decision because of this data. And so also the data also helps partners like the international communities and so forth to be able to help you with that. So one of the disheartening things I don't understand is why are we trying to hide the data? The only data we have on self harm in Guyana goes back to 2001. And then you have a minister comes out and he talks about some data, and it's usually about 50 or 60 less than what the average should be, because I'm assuming, and I'm going to go on to say that if a lot is not being done with mental health in Guyana, I don't see the data from 2001 being any better in 2024. Matter of fact, I think it's going to be worse.
Yeah, Colin, thanks for that. Really, I mean, the information, and this is what our struggle always be is that these guys are not sharing information, and the recently there was a bill passed there, but they just keep passing these bills, and we're not getting the information that is needed so that you can able to make informed decisions, and
Mhm.
we as a member of parliament are struggling sometimes to have the right information because if you don't write to parliament, you don't get it. And then sometimes you write your questions and ask for answer, and it comes out very lame. You're not going to
Right,
believe how lame it comes through, these guys. I will, on another program, I'll publish some of the response that they're doing so that people
right,
will understand when they're saying that opposition is not doing anything, it's because of lack of information. And the information should be there so that, look, the opposition is like the second government. We
right,
are the one who can make a lot of recommendations. Dr. Vincennes make a lot of recommendations, putting out the point of view how they're changing all the policies that we had and what is the danger of doing that. Because when we made our policies, we done a lot of studies, a lot of feasibility studies was done, a lot of export was being hired, a lot of skilled people. We never put too much of wrong, what square peg and wrong hole. We ensure that decisions are being guided by the export that usually have that. So Colin, I know that with the issue of these mental health issues, I know it's a very big thing in Guyana, but I think, and it always ticked me off that the Ministry of Social Services are not doing enough by community, by setting the social work, by having the station. When I mean station, I mean in the social work station. We can afford to do it now.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I passed the other day at Melanie, Damishana there on the road. There was this post office that they have pensioner lining up to collect their pension book and all these things. Doc, you're not gonna believe this thing in the rain, crowded together, old
Mm,
people
mm,
struggling.
mm.
I was
Tell
gonna
me, how are we
say,
gonna deal with these
I
issues?
was gonna say, and Colin brought out something that I think people ought to take note of, which is even across health lines, everything is becoming a disaster in Guyana. Health is one. But what Colin just said, that he expected 2024 data would show it to be worse. And it correlates with the way this government is behaving.
Right,
At least 50% of the people are living on less than $5 per day.
right.
Whereas
Mm-hmm.
whereas about 1% of the people are getting 58% of the budget in infrastructure, the people who getting the contracts.
That's right.
And to talk about how they get it, is that's another issue. But that's where 666 billion
Brilliant.
Guyana dollars is going. So when you have more than half of the population, which are the poor half, getting less than $5 a day, that puts pressure. And especially in an environment where you're getting inflation, where you people cannot even afford to buy a slice of pumpkin.
Mm,
So when you put that pressure on people, when a man with who we know Guyanese, we've got all kinds of pride. When you as a man cannot even afford to take care of your family, that's not only put you under a lot of stress and make you get crazy. It also translates into those who are also suffering, your kids and your wife and everything. I've never heard so many murders that are being committed these days than all the years that I've been growing up in Guyana, for example. So it is again because of the policies of this government that is taking care of their rich friends and family, where all of the money is going and none is going to the people. That's, to me, that's the root cause. I'm no, you know, sociologist, but I'm convinced that that's one of the main roots of the causes.
I want to go back
Absolutely.
to. I was going to go back
Well,
to the bill, Ricky, that
yes,
you were mentioning in Parliament. So the self harm suicide bill, prevention bill, it's a step in the right direction, right? But then again, every bill that is being published, you have to ensure that you have the requisite infrastructure in place. A bill is just
correct.
a letters on a paper, right? But what's important is how do you back up that bill with the appropriate infrastructure? You know, what is our ratio? We have one of the lowest ratios in the world of mental health practitioners to population. We don't even have about 100. So in every region, in every major hospital, every clinic, every health post, every district hospital, we should have mental health practitioners to be able to be able to treat, diagnose mental cases, right? And again, money is not the problem now. I wanted also to mention as a cross-cutting discussion. I had a few months ago the UN with an expert from Chatham House, and he says, "Look, you guys have oil, right? And within the contract, you probably should have written so that there is a sort of a health tax, right, or an environmental tax that is there, and Dr. Adams would probably be aware of that, and you now can route that environmental tax into health programs such as mental health, such as diabetes, hypertension, and so forth. So again, I want to go back to the infrastructural deficiencies. The government just came up with a 2024 national action plan, But what is good of an action plan if you're not saying how is going to be done? How are we going to address stigma? People are still scared to call the hotline. You get reports that you call the suicide hotline, nobody answers. You call 914. 914 is the hotline. You call 911 first. 911, they may tell you that about 914, they may connect you to it, but they also will tell you, no, we're not the people to call. Call 914. You call 914, nobody answers. Up on the coast, I had a family member who had gotten ill and eventually died at home, and we couldn't even find an ambulance. There was no ambulance that serviced between Pleasant and Melanie after 7 or 8 o'clock. You're oil producing country. I mean, an ambulance is how much? I mean, it's a couple $1 million. Again, we're making about $20 million, 15 to 20 million US dollars. We're making about $4 to $5 billion a day, and still we have an inadequate healthcare apparatus. Dr. Adams mentioned poverty. We have 40% poverty, 20% among kids, 10% of our children are severely wasting away nutritionally. This is the problem. This is what we boast in an oil producing country of only 800,000 people.
Yep.
Colin, I'm very, and I'm in totally agreement with you here that, that is the issues that we're having. And I like that you mentioned that we don't have the infrastructure to support. It's easy for these guys to say these things, easy to put a bill forward, but is it working for Guyana? Do you have the infrastructure to support that? And I think that's the key. And that's what I mentioned earlier, that the Ministry of Social Services should have this offices set up at least every other community or every, 4 or 5 communities that can
Yeah.
service that. And
Community
how do,
centers.
yeah,
Community
centers, and how
centers.
do you,
Right.
you have to ensure that, and this is where the not make use doc of the University of Guyana. If you work as a government and work in collaboration with the University of Guyana, say, hey, look, we are going to be having substations or centers across the different regions. We will require 200 doctors in 2024, mental health officers in 2024. We require another 100 in 2025. So therefore, your university now would put this application out, screen the students, maybe put it in the thing and say, oh, who wants to be studying mental health? We have some openings here or some demand here, right? So that is how the government of Guyana had to be playing a role with the University of Guyana. But guess what? They want to play politics. They want to
Yep.
control the councils. They come in and
Now let me
stand
give you let
on
me
the
give you
councils.
let me give you a couple more specific. I'm glad you brought that up. Oil and gas in the coalition. As a matter of fact, even before I started, I went to the EPA. Vice Chancellor Griffith, after he and I had this conversation and my recommendation, he brought me to help him out at the University again. I was here, but when he gave me a fancy title, but nevertheless, what we did is set up a petroleum engineering unit, a department, a faculty at the University of Guyana in the engineering faculty. We even went out and we joined with the University of Trinidad and Tobago and UWI as with partners to set up the structure. We even structured the programs. We even set up the programs where part was going to be done in Trinidad and part was going to be done here, and nobody knows what has happened. So now we've got an EP without a single person with 1 hour of training in petroleum engineering to oversee the petroleum engineering sector. And here's the other thing, and I'm sure Ricky, you've hear me say this all the time. When I was at EPA, we went and got $1 million from the World Bank to set up a petroleum engineering unit at the EPA. The document is there, the big World Bank cover, with a 36-member team to start. We had already set up the structure with the organization chart and everything else. And every single person, you had to have at least 5 to 10 years experience in addition to your degree. These were international exports. They scrapped all of that. We also had what we call a study leave policy for the employees at EPA. All you had to do, go get admitted to university. It applies to the EPA. We're gonna sponsor you to go to the university, and then you come back. You serve 5 years. This when I left, all of the a lot of people went and they applied, and when they came back and said, "Well, okay, we had got that admission," you know what they said? Listen to this. They said that I wanted to turn the EPA into university, and that's not what it was built for. They scrapped everything. So right now, we got an EPA that is overseeing the oil and gas of this country, a consequential, um, you know, agency such as the EPA, overseeing this most important sector of our economy, and we do not have a single person. I am not exaggerating, with 1 hour or even a minute of formal petroleum training, oil and gas training. That's a fact. That's a fact. So Exxon is calling the shots on everything that we're doing. Everything. And you remember what the judge said? Exactly that we are being submissive and pliant. Exxon, they get whatever they want. They couldn't do that when we were there. We stopped flaring. They couldn't dump water. They couldn't go above the EIA limit because that's sacred. That's illegal. They cannot do that in the United States. Our number one rule was you will not do anything less than what you have to abide with in the United States or any other those type of countries. As a matter of fact, we might even be more rigorous. That was my rule to them when they arrived, and they agreed. They agreed to everything until when we left, the government said, "No, no, don't worry what they did before. You don't have to agree to anything."
Doc, I wanted to bring to your attention, and we will do this discussion after, because I recall 2 years ago I asked you that we should really meet when on Exxon board they brought on two environmentalists as director on that board,
Yeah.
two or three of them, and we will
Yep.
have to continue to press on because you know the money is there, um, but you have to get regards from my country. This is the thing. My country, you have to get regards for.
You're
And
talking about the Exxon, the
yes,
international Exxon.
yes,
Well,
yeah,
but guess what? You know why those two came on board? Because they said the reason why they came, that Exxon was not being good stewards of the environment internationally. That was why they decided to fight them to get on the board.
yeah. And that is a fight
Well, I
we will
want
have to
to.
fight because it is very important. It is very important that we hold these things and hold the company them accountable. We just can't be submissive about it. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, I wanted to say that Dr. Adams brought up a very good point about, and Dr. Adams would be one of the most competent people to be able to drive these outcomes about education. So every single entity, you know, around the world understands the importance of institutionalization. I think in Guyana, when we think about institution, we think about the building, like the Georgetown Public
Yeah,
Hospital, or we
yeah,
think about the EPA, right? But no, that's
Yeah,
not an institution. And politicians talk about we building a brand new institution, they're building a brand new building. You're gonna just
that's
open
right.
up and then afterwards you go away. That thing just runs however it runs, right? But institution, three major areas, right? Training and education, which is Dr. Adams was saying that he was big about doing, because an institution has to keep on learning. It has to keep on being updated with the latest trends, right? Because the world is just not stagnated, right? To Guyana, it's changing, and Guyana of itself is changing as well. Then you have to do research. You can't know how you're doing if you're not asking tough questions.
right.
How are we doing? What can we
Yeah.
do better? That's what research does. And then coupled with that, you need to now package your services in a great framework of customer service and evaluation, be able to evaluate your performances. I mean, just think about every single entity there is that existing, whether it's healthcare, agriculture, environment, whatever. We are totally lacking institutionalization, and I believe, and I want to say, I think the main thing that Guyana is suffering from is an institutional problem, because if we cannot be able to learn, understand, and to be able to deliver services, I mean, we're just going to continue along this path.
Colin, thank you. And Doc, we are 8 o'clock already.
Yeah.
So just a final wrap from you, and I'll come to Colin for a final wrap also.
Yeah,
30 seconds.
the whole bottom line here in the discussions that I was involved in tonight was showed again several things. This government continues to attempt to fool the people. Compared to when we were there, we put even after the 23 years they were there before. And I could only use the EPA as one example because I know it happened in all of the agencies. We met a disaster. The staff, the entire staff, without exception, said that it was a dysfunctional agency. Even the board told me that are you sure you want because all the things that you're telling me here, this is not how we operate in Guyana. But it was because of those 23 years. And people got to remember, guys, that you hear the government all the time, well, y'all 4 years. They have been in office out of the last 32 years or so. They have been in there like 27 of those, over 87% of the time. And now they've got money. They've got all the money. So folks, do not be fooled. You see what you see, you hear what you hear, and you feel what you feel. Don't let them tell you that you're seeing and reading and hearing something differently. They're trying to fool you because of the election is coming up.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. And Colin, you want to say a final couple 30 seconds closing remarks?
Yeah, I think Guyana is facing a healthcare crisis. We've now ascended into a higher bracket of standard of living, and with that has come so many more issues, whether it's mental health cases of suicide, depression, or it's heart disease, stroke, diabetes, which is among the top killers in the country. And I think that the government is saying that we're doing all this great progress. The reality is you're losing almost $1 billion based on the number of people and the GDP per capita when folks die every day, or every couple of days when somebody dies of suicide in Guyana. You're looking at it being between 30,000 United States dollars, roughly about 6 million Guyana dollars, that's being lost in total productivity. And you can't have a very good society if we don't take care of health. You can't have oil and gas. I mean, who's going to pump the oil if everybody is dying, right? Who's going to drive the taxis, or who's going to work at the ministries or stuff? So we need to take care of the country's healthcare. And also we need to address the high levels of poverty. 40% poverty, like I said, no matter how great the government is saying, these numbers are real. No matter whatever they're talking about the GDP, tonight a mother with three is going to go to bed hungry with her kids in an oil-rich country called Guyana.
Thank you, Colin, for that, and thank you, Dr. Vince Adams. Folks, there you have it. We had a wonderful rapture here, but we bring to you the facts and the truth about Guyana. And next week, folks, we'll be having Mr. Ramjatan, because we wanted to focus on that bill that was passed in Parliament with the land acquisition. And as Colin mentioned, that will cause more mental health issues to our people of Guyana. So next week, stay tuned for us. And please do share our programs as far as you can, as much as you can, or Facebook. And we'll see you next week. Once again, thank you very much, and good night, gentlemen.
Thanks, Ricky, and
Good
thanks
night.
to
Good
our
night. It's been a
audience.
pleasure.
Good night.
All right.